I have had a ton of comments that are like, "Hey, you're a cis white guy that was on the right and red pilled, and now you're not. How did that happen?" Or how I got into the red pill community was 100% into conspiracy. I started to really see like, oh, you guys don't actually support small government. You want to use the government to enforce your values.
Mind you, if you listen to him, he was a leftist the whole time. But like I spoke earlier, the walls were built to keep him in. So they funnel him to the right. They hook the little boys young, they feed them these micro doses. And then by the time they're 19, 20, 21, and it's time for them to vote, it's time for them to go to the military and things of that nature, they've been red pilled. No lie, y'all. Every time I see men talking about how they broke free of red pill content and all that stuff, I get excited. I mean, a dub is a dub, right? That's my motto. A dub is a dub is a dub. Um, but there's a little added, there's something a little extra when a cishet white man overcomes the red pill. Because the way that oppression works, right? We know it's intersectional. So on the flip side, when black women overcome oppression or when black women succeed, it's in spite of all of these barriers, right? They don't have an advantage. Black women don't have an inherent advantage at all in society, right? Black men barely have an advantage because we're men, right? But that's it. Every other way, we don't have an advantage, but black women have no advantage in society whatsoever. Whatsoever. Institutionally, they don't have an advantage. They don't. So when black women overcome, I'm like, oh shit, it's a little extra. It's a little like, damn, okay. Shout out to her, man. She look, like I know she had to do a lot of fucking work. She had to overcome a lot. I can say the same thing about a black man, to be honest with you. A black man overcomes and he succeeds, and I'm like, that's what's up, black man. That hey, shout out to my black men for succeeding, so on and so forth, right? Conversely, when a white man unpacks his misogyny, his racism, his classism, whatever, I go, because all the systemic barriers are in place for him to not do that. They built, they, I grew up in the projects in the early 80s. That's when my journey in the project started, all the way until 2000. And I remember when we didn't have a gate around our projects at one point in time. Somebody got killed. They put a gate up, right? Then somebody else got killed. They put a security shack there. We called it a security shack. They put a security shack there. At first, the security used to be like cordial, and they just were security. They literally were just there. Like you felt like they were just like a presence. You didn't really notice them. They did their job. Hey, how's it going? We got to know them by first name. Hey, what's up, Bill? What's up, P? What's up? Da, da, da. Everybody knew. Then they hired. I'll never forget. They hired Platt Security, PLATT, Platt Security, and Platt Security was like having like a military presence. It was like being occupied by a foreign invader, right? And they harassed us, and many lawsuits got filed against them, and Platt lost. They hurt one of my closest friends at that time. They would chase us. I got cited one time. They called the police, drew guns on us. I ended up in the back of a police car as a teenager for violating curfew, just like all types of stuff. And I started to realize that they didn't build the gates to keep people out or just to keep people out. The gates were also built to keep us in, right? And that is how the system works. That's how the system works, because the gates that keep all the oppressed people out also keep the oppressors in. They make it really hard for them, if they ever want to leave, If they ever want to leave the plantation, so to speak, even as the human traffickers on the plantation, right? The controllers of the plant, if they wake up one day and go, wait, this is fucked up. I don't want to be here. This is terrible. Hell no. Hey, wait. Hell no. I don't want to be here no more. The system also works to keep them in there. So when I see a cishet white man unpack his shit, I go, shout out to you, brother. Definitely. Shout out to you for doing that. So I love it. I love it.
All right, so I'm making this video because I have had a ton of comments that are like, "Hey, you're a cis white guy that was on the right and red pilled, and now you're not. How did that happen?" It's a great question, and there's not just one answer, right? I was 100% red pilled, listening to people like Sargon of Akkad and Jordan Peterson, Ben Shapiro, Alex Jones was the guy that really got in there. How I got into the red.
Real quick, I want to highlight a name specifically because every time I go live and I talk about Jordan Peterson being red pillars be like, Jordan Peterson is not red pilled. And I'm like, he like red pillars revere him as like a top red pill thought leader. You know what I'm saying? Right wingers too in general, but like definitely red pillars do it. You know, they're right wingers, but I'm saying specifically red pillars. These dudes be really trying to gaslight me into believing like that Jordan Peterson isn't red pilled. But this guy is saying I was red pilled, and this is who my influencers were. And it's always Jordan Peterson. I promise you, it's like 99% of the time Jordan Peterson is mentioned. It's ridiculous the level of gaslighting that these men try to do.
That really got in there. How I got into the red pill community was 100% into conspiracies. I was a young lad, 2012, 2013. I didn't know shit about politics. And I watched just countless hours of conspiracy videos, and they weren't originally just anti-democratic. They would call out both sides. Gradually, as we got closer to the Trump administration, I had noticed that all the conspiracy theorists and channels that I were listening to were just pro right wing. Like they were like, actually, Republicans are like not corrupt. It's just the Democrats. Like seriously, I watched it in real time, and that was part of it. Another part of it was like I was being, I was one of these angry young men that were like, "Oh my God, feminism is ruining our country. They're trying to make the country less masculine." Now, you can see me. I'm a big dude. I'm tatted up, bearded up, and work blue collar jobs. I work for UPS. I worked at a chemical plant before that. So I am the target audience for this stuff. I was running around with like "Don't Tread on Me" shirts and stuff like that. So I will say there are certain things I can look to as how I made the shift. I would say number one was actually how the right worships the police. So I was all about like small government, right? And like not having like this like major police state. Now, of course, if anyone was alive and caught it during the last decade, we had tons of things happen with police brutality. And even as a conservative, I was against police brutality because, again, as someone for small government, you shouldn't want militarized police going around fucking killing people or killing citizens and violating their civil rights. That's part of being a conservative. But there was a shift in the forums that in the groups that I was in, where it was like I started to really see like, oh, you guys don't actually support small government. You want to use the government to enforce your values.
Listening to him talk about like what conservatism is about. The reason like if you guys have I literally just watched the video and it had had an old KKK like the president of the KKK back in the like 50s and 60s. And it was sad listening to him because, of course, he's a fucking Nazi, or he was. But he sounded more reasonable than the Republicans today. A neo-Nazi from the 1950s sounded more reasonable than Republicans today. Like the small government, like you could, like that was his thing. But he sounded more reasonable. And I'm sitting there listening to this, like, if this isn't a sign that we are on the cusp of a just all-out fascist regime, I don't know like I would play it. I really do want to play the video. I might play it at the end of this one. I don't know, depends on how I feel. But it's pretty fucking crazy. It's pretty crazy to listen to. And mind you, he said some of the most, like, within that, he said some of the most despicable shit about black people. It was just like, you were like, when you listen to him at first, I'm telling you, you're like, okay. I was like, yeah, I mean, yeah, that's fair, whatever. And then by the end, he was like basically calling black people monkeys. And I was like, there goes that racism there. But so do Republicans, though. Like, so do modern day Republicans. They just don't say it out loud, but they think it. So what's the difference? Right? They're just more covert with that portion of their ideology. But the rest of it, what they actually believe in is more harmful to black people than what a neo-Nazi believed in the 1950s and 60s. I cannot turn a blind eye to that. That is really remarkable. And this young man, he clocked it though in real time, and that's it. That's what, and because he sounds more like the guy that I'm talking about from the 1950s. See what I'm saying? So, like the small government, the like anti-police, militarizing the police and all that stuff. He's like, yeah, that's the shit that I'm about. Dabbling a little racism here, a little misogyny there. Now that's what makes him conservative. That's what he wanted to conserve, right? And they lost him because the conservatives of today are anything but conservative. They're not even traditional conservatives. It's crazy.
That the police in this country and the militarization of police 100% was one of the big things that caused me to shift, where even there were instances where of course there were some instances where the police might have been justified in what they did, but there were 100% multiple instances where I watched citizens get their rights violated. A lot of them were black, but not all of them. And the groups I were in, who were supposed to be these freedom-loving conservatives and anti-police state, were cheering it on. And I remember getting into arguments with people like, this is not small government. Having a militarized police run around. Eric Garner in New York was one that really pushed me over the edge, where like they put that dude in an MMA chokehold. And what was his crime? Allegedly selling untaxed cigarettes on the street. Like, what are we doing? At that point I was like, what are we doing? Like, we're choking out people on the street for.
Mind you, if you listen to him, he was a leftist the whole time. But like I spoke earlier, the walls were built to keep him in. So they funnel him to the right. That's what happens with a lot of the white youth, the men and the women, but specifically the men. They are like, oh, I'm not down with the police. I want to go to college. I want to, you know what I'm saying? But they don't see anything but right-wing extremism. Like that's the end of the tunnel. But they don't see anything but, right-wing politics. The Democrats aren't doing enough. I'm not pro-Democrat. I don't want to be, in the Democratic establishment or whatever the case may be. But since we have this two-party system that is a duopoly that is controlled by corporations and fascists, and those two people are mutually exclusive. But what ended up happening and what ends up happening is cishet white men are funneled into the right-wing pipeline, into the red pill pipeline. They're funneled there. And he even said a huge way that he ended up in there though was because of masculinity or buying into the idea of masculinity. That's how it, so they get you. They really hook the kids young. They hook the little boys young. They feed them, feed them these micro doses. And then by the time they're 19, 20, 21, and it's time for them to vote, it's time for them to go to the military and things of that nature. They've been red pilled. They've been they've been hoodwinked. They've been bamboozled.
For selling loosies, that's not small government. The militarization of police, and more specifically, the worship that the right does, outright bootlicking of police, what really started to sway me a little bit. Secondly, I had a child in 2018. I have my son, he's 6 now, and healthcare and childcare in this country has radicalized me. I watched the right, and they're still doing this, advocate for people having children. Now, my child was unplanned, but we are the only country that doesn't have guaranteed paternity leave, maternity leave, and we have very, very strict standards for who gets help and who doesn't. For example, like I'm a single father right now, and they tell me I make too much money to have any kind of assistance whatsoever.
You got to make to get on certain programs. I've seen it. It was like $30,000 a year. I'm like, in America, $30,000 a year in America, $30,000 a year. Like it's really scary. It's really scary. Welfare. Everybody should get welfare. Everybody should get welfare. I'm UBI guy. So I think everybody deserves welfare. I think we give so much money to this government, and there is a surplus of money all the time. They just pocket it, right? The billionaires pocket the money. Give it back to us. I think everybody deserves welfare. Everybody should be on welfare in America. Whether you're middle class, wealthy, I don't care. We all should be getting $2,000 a citizen. We all should be getting health care. We all should be getting food, just free food. Like we should be getting like free, just access to free food. If you don't want to eat that food, fine. Buy organic food, buy better food, whatever, if you can afford it. But everybody should be eating. Everybody should have somewhere to stay. Everybody should have education. Everybody should have health care. Bare minimum. We all should be getting welfare. Every single citizen in America should qualify for welfare. All of us. I will never shame anybody for being on welfare. That's nuts. People say, oh, welfare is supposed to be temporary. Says who? Who told you that? It's a fucking lie. Welfare should be in perpetuity, not temporary.
And this is not the way it is in all these countries. And that brings me to my next thing is traveling. I traveled and met with people. I have friends in Europe. I have friends in Canada. And talking to them helped me debunk a lot of myths that people have in America. You know, in America, you get told that like socialized medicine is horrible. You can't see a doctor. And like, no, dude, it's not true. It's not true. Yes, if you need like something basic like stitches or something like that, you might sit in a waiting room for a while. But if you need immediate care, it's not true. They see you and you do not pay anything. Medication, you pay very little. I remember I told my friends in Europe that we were playing video games together. One lives in Spain, one lives in London. And I told them the story about how I had to drive myself to the emergency room. And they said, well, why didn't you just call, the emergency services? And I said, dude, it would have cost me like $2,000 to get an ambulance to the hospital. And I thought I was having a fucking heart attack. Turned out I had pneumonia. There's no reason I should have drove myself to the hospital. Or called an Uber. And I learned that that's only a thing in America. We're the only country. And what kind of started to make me upset with the right was they would say, hey, we should be spending money on Americans, but every time there was a proposal to spend money on Americans, they say, no one gets handouts, no one gets this. But then I sat there and looked at all this corporate welfare, these tax subsidies, tax cuts, tax loopholes, tax breaks, or just straight up handouts to corporations to subsidize them. And I'm like, you guys sit here and talk shit on people on food stamps and stuff all day, but the minute we bring up corporate welfare, it's like, well, we're against that too, but I'd rather go after like a single mom on food stamps. It's like, okay. The main thing was I just there was a time where I just gave other voices a listen. Bernie Sanders, 100% swayed me. And interestingly enough, it was when he was on the Joe Rogan show. And at the time, even Joe Rogan was like, I agree with every fucking thing. Because I remember Joe Rogan put him on a spot and said, well, how are we going to pay for this? And Bernie Sanders said, we can easily pay for it. We can easily pay for it. And I then read a book that Bernie had wrote and just went down this rabbit hole and was like, wow, that's kind of where I'm at, where like, yeah, I believe in like economic populism, like in democratic socialism, where like you can still have a form of capitalism, but you have all these safety nets underneath. And that's kind of how like all the countries in the Nordic region do it. It's kind of how Canada does it. It's kind of how Germany does it, and places in Europe does it. And that kind of started getting me. The main thing was
he'll be a communist in 5 years. He'll be a communist in 5 years, man. Come join the dark side, man.
Watched the conservative party that I was a part of go from limited government to we are actually endorsing a straight up Christian theocracy. And anyone that tells you that they're not doing that is 100% gaslighting you. They 100%, the Republican Party right now, A, is not the real Republican Party anymore, but B, these people, and it's not just Trump, the people behind the scenes 100% want to install a Christian theocracy. And even when I was a conservative, I was a constitutionalist, and I would object to that even if I was still red pilled now, because A, I'm not a Christian, and B, I believe in freedom of religion. So I believe that there should be no government mandated religion. In fact, I would never even vote for someone, even when I was on the right, that would say they're passing this legislation because of their Christian beliefs. I would instantly vote against them. So those are just some of the things that got me to transform from the right to the left. And I'll make another video explaining.
I love that right there. The reason why I love this video is because I also talk often about how the red pill is a right-wing pipeline, like we know, right? Again, but red pillars argue because they're in it. So they don't know. They don't know. Some of them be lying, don't get me wrong. But a lot of them really don't know. Like, they're really dumb. They really are fed copious amounts of bullshit, like daily, right? They just consume copious amounts of bullshit daily. And so it's hard. It's hard for them, to differentiate the truth from the lie. And then they lack an education. And clearly this man is educated. I don't know if he's formally educated or not, but he is educated. He has a high level of education. There are so many things about his story that, again, like I said, the walls that are built to keep us out also keep them in. He was talking about how when he traveled the world, when he got exposed to other groups of people in America, we are completely segregated for the most part. And I know it looks like we live together. We live by each other, but we don't live together though. I live in an upper middle class neighborhood in Southern California. I'm the only Black person on my block. You know what I'm saying? Like, my child goes to a school. There's only, from what I can tell, there's 5 or 6 Black people at the school. I haven't seen any Black teachers. I haven't seen any Black staff whatsoever. And they are having a problem with racism at his school currently, right now. Like, the school has had to address it. And my son was a victim of it. So, it's like, that's what it, they like, we live by each other, but we don't live with each other. We don't. New York is segregated. LA is segregated. It's a melting pot, but nobody's melted. It's It's more like a soup. It's not a melting pot. It's not a, it's not like a chili where everything is mushed and, and all the, it's not a sauce like a spaghetti sauce. It's a soup. It's a soup. And in soup, most of the time, unless you blend it, everything keeps its integrity, right? So that you see the carrots, you see the onions, you see the you see the garlic or whatever the case may be. You see the bay leaves, you see everything, and it's in the same pot, but they're not, it's not together. And that's what America's like.